Chapter 7. April 30th, 2158. 1757. Standard Earth Time. Reach classified. Only the nearly silent humming of the computers and projectors filled the room. Neither I nor any of the other occupants had said anything since we had entered. Even our greetings were nothing but acknowledging nods to each other. It was as if every one of us knew that if we started talking, even just small talk, we would inevitably discuss the subjects which were on today's agenda. But for that, we wanted everyone present. Only one person was missing from our illustrious round. Andrew Clark, the head of the Alliance Communication Department. He was also the head of the Alliance Intelligence Service, which officially didn't exist yet. Truthfully, it didn't surprise me that he wasn't here yet. Over the last 2 years, I've had the pleasure to get to know him, and I knew he would arrive at the meeting the moment it was supposed to start. It was just like him to not waste even a single minute. He was probably already on his way to this room, going over all the data he had gathered. My eyes wandered away from the data pad I had in my hand, which showed me a version of the Galactic Codex. One much more comprehensive than the one I'd known from the Mass Effect games. But at the same time, there was less information. It had been a gift from the Asari diplomatic delegation that had come to Shangxi a week after the fighting with the Turians had ended. Somehow they had already made a translation software for English and the major Citadel races. After a bit of thinking, it didn't surprise me that they had learned our language already, especially after I heard from Wright that the Turians had some of our soldiers as prisoners. It wouldn't surprise me if they got our language from them. After all, we had been trying the same with the Turian prisoners. Fortunately, a prisoner exchange had happened just a week ago as a sign of willingness to end the conflict before it could escalate. As I looked to my left, I saw how Anita Goyle, the head of our diplomatic corps, was still engrossed in the Codex. For a woman closer to 60 than 50, she certainly didn't look like it. Not a single gray strand could be seen in her blonde hair, and she looked more like a woman in her mid-40s. Somehow I knew that would probably change in the coming years. After all, she had been selected as our spokesperson for the negotiations with the Citadel. Her emerald eyes showed intelligence and political experience as they scanned the text for every bit of information that could become useful to her. With a quiet sigh, put Admiral Wright, who sat to my right, the datapad down and leaned back in his chair. The exhaustion was plain to see on his face. He had only arrived on Reach today and was probably still going over the damage and cleanup reports from the Shangxi fiasco, as some called it. The term First Contact War was also beginning to gain traction too. That was my favorite term for it too, and not just because it would be the official title in the ME games, but because I believed that every war changed something fundamental for human society. Meeting a new species for the first time in human history fit the bill for me. There were still 2 more people inside the room. One of them was Director Port, and the other was Dr. Helkin. Michael had his eyes closed and was tipping his nose with his right index finger over and over again. That was one of his quirks. Something he always did when he was going over facts in his head. Dr. Helkin, on the other hand, seemed the most relaxed person in the room. I did not doubt that she had read the Codex multiple times and was already working on replicating some of the Turian technology. Or perhaps she had already done that and continued working on some other projects of hers. Perhaps even both. You never knew with that woman. Even now, in her mid-60s, she was as brilliant as ever and showed no sign of slowing down. Just as I wanted to pick up my datapad again to read some more, the reinforced doors to the underground meeting room opened, and Andrew entered the room. If you didn't know where to look, you would have never guessed that this man had dealings with all major intelligence agencies that were present on Earth. He looked like a friendly neighbor who had 3 children, a lovely wife, and a middle-class job. Everything about him screamed normal. Nothing was out of place. His brown hair was neatly cut, and he kept the typical body of someone in his mid-30s. He truly was what someone would call the picture of normality. That was until you looked into his brown eyes and behind the facade he carefully maintained, and that was just when he let you. Then you saw someone who was intelligent and shrewd enough to weave a net around you that would never be noticed until it was already beyond late. Another interesting fact was that he thanked me for saving his life the first time we met. He never elaborated on that, and I didn't ask. Not that he would have told me. Nonetheless, he was someone I could call a friend, and as invested in the alliance as any of us five. With a short nod, he took his place at the round conference table, waiting for the meeting to begin. As if a signal was given, Michal's eyes shot open and he said, "It seems like everyone is present. Great. The meeting can begin now." With a few commands on the console before him, the light in the room dimmed. At the same time, the projector in the middle of the table started up and showed a picture of Shangxi. Michal turned to Wright and asked, "What is the status of the operations in the system? You were there until a few days ago. How does it look?" "I'll start with what's going on the planet itself," began Wright. "The cleanup is still ongoing. The main streets may be free of debris now, but many others are not. Many buildings were destroyed in the fighting. Nothing to speak of the bridges that our forces collapsed, so that they weren't forced to spread themselves too thin. It will take time and a lot of money and resources to rebuild." He took a small breath to steady himself and continued. "First evaluations show the number of deaths in the middle of 3,000. That number is still climbing as we excavate dead bodies under collapsed buildings. More than 2/3 of our garrison forces on Shangxi have been killed, and the battle group in orbit has been annihilated with no survivors. We've also found civilian casualties. All bodies that we find are taken to a designated area and are being prepared to be given back to their families. The Turian bodies are currently kept separately until further orders." Wright took a small moment to collect his thoughts as he opened a new file on his datapad. "As I already said," he continued, "the battle group that we stationed above Shangxi was destroyed, but they could get a signal out to us before they were. Without it, it could have taken longer than 2 weeks to react to the attack." A quiet, still too slow, left my lips before I could stop it. But it was either quiet enough so that nobody heard it, or they didn't react to it. One thing was clear, though. Everybody had the same thought. That was one of the reasons why I had ordered Dr. Hoshiyama to think of ways to make our drives faster. He was already brainstorming ideas, but I hoped I could secure him some of the recovered Turian technology to support him. Cleanup operations in orbit are proceeding smoothly. The debris around Shangxi has been taken care of already, and paths to the planet are clear. So, help from outside sources can come to the planet? I've been contacted by multiple people offering to help, interjected Michael in a short pause between sentences. With a nod, Wright acknowledged the question. "Yes, sir. While our ships are continuing to stay on alert level orange, civilian ships are allowed in the system." A small smile and a nod back were the only response Michael gave as he made a short note and gestured to Wright to continue. "Currently, we're in the process of searching the destroyed Turian ships for any kind of intact technology. Luckily, one of the ships was mostly intact. It seems the bridge and a few other necessary systems got hit. Their reactor and drive also took damage, but nothing too significant. The transport to reach is already organized, and it should arrive in the next few days. Oscar, I would like it if you could send Dr. Hoshiyama here as well. His expertise with starship engineering could be extremely valuable in analyzing the vessel." A small smirk played on my lips as I answered, "That is no problem. It's more like I would have to stop him from doing so. I already thought of sending him here permanently anyway. With the growing shipyards in orbit, he's of more use here than elsewhere." "Thank you. Is it a problem if he's attached to the science department?" Wright asked with a side glance towards Dr. Helkin. "That's not a problem," Barbara answered for me, "as long as he doesn't interrupt my other projects," she added quietly. I knew that those could do incredible work together, but there were still a few times when they argued like schoolchildren. While Takahashi was the foremost expert in starship engineering, Dr. Barbara Helkin was probably the foremost expert in all other fields, at least in human space. So while Takahashi wanted to discuss with someone who could at least follow all of his theories, Dr. Helkin got annoyed with him pretty fast when she was concentrating on another field of science at that moment, and then they would argue. I heard one of those arguments and fled the room as fast as I could. While they threw insults at each other like children, the level of discussion was so high that nobody could follow their arguments. They had a way of making you feel stupid without even trying to do so in the first place. "You heard the doctor, Admiral. There's no problem," I said so that Wright could continue with his report, and he did after clearing his throat. As we are already on the subject of recovered alien technology, we've also sent multiple crates of recovered arms and shield units to your scientist Barbara. All of them were from the Turian forces. I would like to ask you to start with the shield units. Ours are still in development and not even close to mass production for our soldiers. From reports, I gathered that those personal kinetic shields of the Turians are better by magnitude than our prototypes. With a hand gesture, she acknowledged his request. I put some of my best on it. When they have analyzed them, I will take a look as well. With working examples, I guess it will take a month or two, then we will have our own. Wonderful, my soul, replied Wright. There's, of course, more we're collecting from the battlefields, but those are the main things. The next point on my agenda is the effectiveness of our soldiers and Navy against the Turians. I've sent all of you a preliminary analysis, and I would only present my personal opinion on it now. Would that be all right, Director? Michael pondered the question for a moment before he answered. It is your decision, Admiral Wright. I didn't have the time to read it, and I trust your analysis of the situation. So please tell us what you think. Wright's face hardened, and I mentally prepared myself for his opinion. As long as I knew him, he had never held back anything that came to his mind, and this situation was something that should be explained as plain as possible. He took a breath and said, "If we go to war, we're fucked." Well, that had been blunter than I expected. The silence that followed his words was deafening. Even the constant humming of the computers seemed to stop. All of us knew that if it came to war, our position would be precarious, but that it would be this bad? Nobody expected that. The only one who didn't grimace at that was Andrew. He had probably read the preliminary report and came to the same conclusion. "Could you please elaborate?" asked Michael, trying to keep his shock from affecting his voice. "Of course," began Wright, and with a command to his data pad, the projector showed a new picture. It showed the positions of our and the Turian fleets at the beginning of the battle to retake Shangxi. As you can see, we outnumbered the Turian ships 3-1. During the battle, our superior positioning and the element of surprise allowed us to win this battle with acceptable losses. He almost spat those last words out. All of his soldiers were precious to him, and he hated to think of their deaths as something acceptable. But he also never hesitated to risk them if the need arose. After half of the Turian fleet was destroyed, they evacuated from the planet all they could and disappeared through the relay. But from the data we could gather during the battle, it seems like the general estimate is that we would need 2 or 3 ships to match one of theirs, depending on ship class. That was not a good number. While I had no number to compare it to, I believed I had done my part to strengthen our Navy. How outclassed and outgunned must the Alliance have been in the games during the First Contact War? That would mean that at our current technological level, we need at least 3 times as many ships as the Turians, better 4 times as many, I said. That is correct, Oscar, confirmed Wright. In the codex the Asari gave us, there were no fleet sizes or even an estimated population count. Nothing that we could use to guess the number of ships, added Andrew, speaking for the first time since he entered the room. Before Wright could say anything, he continued, "But if we take into account that they have been a member of the Citadel Council for more than a millennium, I guess that the number of ships is somewhere around 5,000. Probably more. At least 10 times as many as we have. Even if we had the technological advantage, which we don't have, we would lose in a direct conflict with them. Sometimes quantity truly is a quality of its own," commented Anita, who had been quiet till then. "That's true," acknowledged Wright. "A lot of that number would be probably stuck in policing their borders. But we should not forget that the Turians are not our only possible enemy. The Asari and Salarians could support them in the event of war by taking over border patrols and thus freeing assets that could be used against us. We currently don't even have 1/10 of that number. I don't see any way we could win without exposing Earth to danger. Something we just can't do." A frown crossed Michael's face before he said, "I see what you mean. We would have to evacuate all planets that can be reached by the relay network. Among them, Earth. Transport them into systems that are too difficult to reach without a DR drive and rebuilt there." After he finished, Michael shook his head. "Nobody would give up Earth willingly. She is humanity's home. That means we must try to avoid any kind of conflict. A picture of a burning planet came to me, of Reapers attacking Earth. My eyes hardened and I unconsciously clenched my hand. It was a memory of what was to come and a reminder to do what I could to prepare for it. That is what I would suggest, said Wright. I concur with the Admiral's analysis, remarked Andrew. We should avoid conflict with the Citadel for now. I noted how Andrew used the words for now, and I wasn't the only one. He wasn't someone to choose his words carelessly, no matter how, but we would clash with the Citadel Council at one point, be it politically or militarily. We should not be in a position where they could hold us at gunpoint and order us around without being able to push back. That was the statement Andrew wanted to make with his words. We should take our time and collect more information. Andrew continued and added with a small grin, after all, knowing is half the battle. Anita threw him a dubious glance and asked, and what is your opinion of the other half? Instead of Andrew, it was Wright who answered with a snort. Violence. Men, muttered Anita and rolled her eyes. Before the discussion could get even further away, Michael intervened. I believe we've strayed from the topic far enough. Is there still something you want to add, James? Or should we continue to the next point on today's agenda? Wright straightened his posture, dropping all signs of humor, and answered, only the report on our ground forces, efficiency of equipment and tactics. He looked at his datapad and opened another file. His eyes flew quickly over the displayed information, summing it up in his mind. It seems like we measure up to the Turians better on the ground than in space. I have to note that this was mostly a defensive battle and only a counteroffensive in the later stages. So I don't know how well we would do in leading an attack on a fortified Turian defense position. But there is some interesting information. I caught a glance towards me and the ghost of a smile on Wright's face before he continued. While the Turians' arms have a higher rate of fire and projectiles that are faster, ours have more stopping power. I guess that is good? Asked Mikkel. Very good, was my answer. Mikkel shifted his look from Wright to me and gestured that I should explain, something that I complied with. It means you would need fewer shots to drop a kinetic shield, for example, or to kill someone. Another point is that we design the hard suits the soldiers get in a way that they can at least stop 2 bullets from our rifles. In theory, that would mean that they could stop the fire from the Turians even better. Ah, thank you for explaining, Oscar, said Mahal and directed his next question back to the Admiral. Your assessment, James? What Oscar said is mostly true. The enemy's bullets were mostly stopped. But since they were smaller and fired at a higher velocity, they could still penetrate the hard suit. Combine that with a higher rate of fire and you get a lot of shots that hit the less protected areas or are just lucky. I took a moment to remember the last reports I got about the projects which were in development in my companies. Once a month, I got a detailed report about everything that happened in every company I owned or invested in. That included the development of new products or the testing of prototypes. If a project interested me, it wasn't uncommon for me that I demanded bi-weekly updates. I searched my mental list for the projects that had to do with armor until I found what I was looking for. Han Kadar is testing a few new material compositions that could be used for hard suits. I relay your findings and see what they come up with. Wright nodded gratefully. My men will be glad to hear that. Could you please continue, James? There's still more we have to discuss, asked Anita impatiently. Sure. The only thing left is the effectiveness of our tactics. While we could hold the line with orthodox battle lines, our troops shine when they used a combination of hold-your-ground mentality and flexible tactics. Every time they used an advantage they had found, it was used until it wasn't useful anymore. Then a new strategy or tactic was implemented. It kept the Turians on their toes, talons, whatever. Their strict command structure was often not fast enough to react to the changing tactics of small units. The use of drop pods was also very effective. We got soldiers on the ground fast enough to stop the breaching of the last defensive line. I expect this tactic will be very effective in clearing landing zones or surrounding enemies. Sadly, the heavy troopers were not as effective as expected. The exoskeleton suit was good against small arms, but since they were intended to be used against armored vehicles, we have to redesign them. They were a target for their cannons much too easily. Of the 10 we sent down, only 2 survived. Wright looked at all of us. one at a time, and said, "That would be all. The completed reports will be sent to you in a month." He took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms as if he was saying, "I've done my job. Now's your turn." "Thank you for your report, Admiral Wright," said Mangowa with formality. A glance at his datapad, and he said, "Before we get to the probably most important topic today, I just want to ask you, Barbara and Oscar, is there something you want to report?" I looked to Barbara, who was still looking at her datapad. She lifted her head to look back, and I signaled her to start. "All projects are on schedule or even ahead of. If you want to know more, read the weekly reports my assistant compiles and sends you." Well, that was to the point. She was probably reading over some new data sent to her. At such moments, she always answered bluntly. In her own words, she would not waste her time answering asinine questions that could be answered by reading. I suppressed a sigh. A little bit more time would have been nice to collect my thoughts. But you have to work with what you get. Still, I took a minute to search for all files I would possibly need, even as I felt their eyes on me, waiting for me to begin. There are only a few things that have to be shared at this moment. Our shipyards are already working to repair the damage sustained to our fleets. We estimate it will take 5 to 6 months to return to our old strength. I would have expected it would take less time. From what I know, we are building enough ships that it would take around 2 months. Chipped right in. "That would have been correct a few days ago," I replied. "But I ordered to stop all work on ships less than 50% finished." "What? We need those ships. Why did you stop the construction?" "Because I want to wait until our scientists finished analyzing the Turian technology. As I know them, they will improve our ship designs by a large margin after this. And those ships can either be improved on or scrapped without losing too much money and resources. I would rather have ships with improved technology than ones that will have to be replaced before the decade is over." Before Wright could say something, Michael placated him. "See it this way, James. It will take more time, but you will get new shiny toys instead." While he didn't like to have fewer ships than before, even if it just was temporary, he could see the advantage of having ships of a newer generation. After thinking it over, he nodded, satisfied with my explanation. "There is some other news you will like, Admiral. Our first 2 carriers will be ready for deployment in about a week." While in canon carriers were built to circumvent the restrictions of the Ferrixon Treaty, Takahashi had proposed to use them as mobile command bases to direct the fleets. At around 800 inches in length and a height and width of 200 EM, it could hold 200 aircraft on both an upper and lower deck. Their kinetic barriers were the strongest we currently had, and their plating was also thicker than all other ships. In exchange, they were also the slowest ships we had, even if their Ezo cores were bigger than those in our dreadnoughts. But since the carriers would stay behind our lines, it was deemed acceptable. "I'll look forward to their naming ceremony then," said Wright with a grin. Gone was the man who was displeased with waiting for his ships, and in his place was a child waiting for Santa Claus to come. "In other news," I continued, "the construction of a prototype for an orbital defense platform has finished. Testing is scheduled to start in 3 days. Another brainchild of Takahashi. As I've mentioned before, he can be a total nerd at times, like I can be. Just because I own a company that spans multiple solar systems and am the head of the economics and construction department of the Alliance, didn't mean that I had no hobbies. Sometimes Takahashi and I would meet for a break and play video games or watch movies. As we played the newest remastered version of the first Halo trilogy, which I may or may not have kickstarted, we discussed the feasibility of ODPs. From there it evolved into actual designs, and now the prototype was finished. It took a few years, but the preliminary data looked promising. Furthermore, the ODP's design was based on modularity. That way, the parts could be produced independently and put together at a designated location. It also allowed us to change them if they had to be repaired, or we could replace them with newer and better ones. The plans for a new shipyard on the last planet of the Olympus system, the dwarf planet Asphodel, have been approved. The needed materials are currently being assembled, and construction should begin in a month. If everything stays on schedule, the first 10 docks finish construction by September. Estimated completion is in 2 years, and it will have 50 docks. Most of them are for ships up to 800 OM, but 10 will be for ships up to 2.5 kilometers. 2.5 kilometers? Asked Wright, Anita, and Mikkel at the same time. Why are you so surprised? Commented Dr. Helkin. Designs for such ships exist for a few years. While they aren't feasible with our current technology, we're planning for the future. I've looked over the plans for the shipyard. It's possible to build more than one ship in the longer cradles. If it's effective, we will use that design again. Ah, that's the reason, said Michael. But I thought spaceships could not be longer than 1,200 mem? That's a common misconception, replied Barbara, and started to explain. If you use a pure E0 drive, the maximal effective ship length is around 1 kilometer. More and the E0 requirements become too high. That is because the E0 you need to create a large enough mass effect field is not proportional to ship length. It's more like an exponential curve. Through Dr. Hoshiyumi's invention of the DR drive, we found out that a more effective energy source to power the E0 core creates a slightly larger mass effect field. In light of this, our maximal effective ship length rose to 1.5 kilometers. Any larger than 1,600 m and our E0 cores start to destabilize. We don't know why at the moment, but are studying the problem. Of course, those facts only affect ships with a ME drive or DR/ME drive. When you're just using a DR drive, then you can build your ships as big as you want. You only have to take into account that you will be slow as a snail. The technology is still new and not yet developed enough. For the ME drives, we had the Prothean blueprints. Thank you for your explanation, Barbara, interjected Makul in the brief pause she used to take a breath. I and everyone else were grateful he did when he did. Else she would have delved deeper and deeper into the topic until nobody understood a word anymore. She muttered to herself about morons and ignorance, but followed Michael's unspoken request to stop. After a few moments, I moved to finish my report. The only thing that's left to say is that our survey ships found a few mineral-rich planets inside our borders. Furthermore, they found a garden world outside the Exodus cluster. Their standing orders are to explore the nearby solar systems, and if they find a mass relay, to not activate it until its destination is confirmed. That sounds great, and your point of not activating the relay binds perfectly in our next topic, said Michael with a smile that he lost not a few seconds later. In its place was the determined gaze of a man who could and would impact the lives of billions with his decisions. As you know, on March 25, 1434 set, a single unknown ship entered the Shangxi system. It was a diplomatic delegation from the Citadel comprising of Asari, another alien species. Their appearance is close to that of a human woman, except for the blue skin color and scalp crests. Their goal was to achieve a ceasefire between the Turian hierarchy and the System Alliance. Admiral Wright agreed to this with the stipulation that all military vessels were to retreat from the relay that leads to Shangxi. As far as we know, this was upheld. After this, the Asari wished to hold further diplomatic talks. Anita was sent to hold these talks, which happened on April 2nd. A short summary is that they wish for us to join the Citadel. Could you please elaborate on this, Anita? Of course, Director, said Anita and stood up, holding her data pad to check her notes if needed. After clearing her throat, Anita began to give a brief summary of what the Citadel and the Council were. The massive space station, the Council species, and the associate species, bolstered with snippets of their cultures. Nothing that we hadn't read in the Codex already, but still necessary so that we were all on the same level of information. After the explanations about our species, we moved to the topic of humanity joining the Citadel. I replied that I had no authority to make that decision. We arranged a second diplomatic meeting, this time on the Citadel for the 25th of June. As a sign of goodwill from both sides, a prisoner exchange was arranged and on April 14th executed. Furthermore, they gave me documentation explaining the major Citadel laws. To sum them up, the following laws have to be recognized by every species associated with the Citadel. Any research into artificial intelligence is prohibited, and any existing AI must be destroyed. Anita took a short break to look around. None of us had any vocal response to this law. While humanity had some success with creating intelligent programs, they were rather limited. It was still within the limits of 6 by Citadel standards. Mass relays are not to be opened without the Council's blessings. This is to prevent contact with possible hostile species. Not that we need those relays anyway, if Hoshiyumi continues to improve the DR drive, muttered Wright to my right. Still, he was correct. At the moment, the mass relays were still the fastest way to travel between clusters and systems, but that didn't help if there was no relay. For these kinds of systems, the DR drive was the better option. Like for the Olympus system we were currently in. I was torn from my thoughts as Anita continued. All Prothean technology and ruins have to be reported to the Citadel Council after they are found. No species is allowed to hold back and hoard their findings, thus allowing all to profit from them. That one gave way to some grimaces and eye rolls. None of us believed that all would profit from the findings. It was more likely that the Council species profited the most by this law, especially since the Asari had a working Prothean beacon, one they never told anyone about. In my mind, this was a dangerous card that could be played if the situation was truly dire. After all, it would probably make me the target of more than a few assassination attempts by the Asari if word got out that I knew about the beacon. The regulation of WMDs as stated in the Citadel Conventions. The details have been forwarded to you, and the last one is called the Treaty of Pharixen. That one could be problematic. While the other would restrict us somewhat, they didn't touch subjects that were important to us. But the Treaty of Pharixen would limit the force we could field to protect our territory. Not really something that would be popular, especially after our first contact with another spacefaring civilization was hostile. Anita's thoughts were along the same line if I interpreted the small grimace on her face. Nonetheless, she started to explain the treaty. This treaty restricts the number of space vessels of the classification Dreadnought. Its purpose is to guarantee civil and peaceful conduct between the Citadel species. The current ratio is 5. 3, 1. The Turians are allowed 5 dreadnoughts for every 3 the other Council species build. Every other species is only allowed 1 for every 3 or 5. The number is rounded up. Rounded up? What exactly does that mean? Asked Wright, his voice filled with resentment towards the treaty. For example, if the Turians have 25 dreadnoughts, we can build 5. If they have 26, we can have 6. The same applies to the other Council species. If they have 15, we have 5. They have 16, we have 6. Furthermore, the higher number counts. So if the Turians have 25 and the Asari 16, we can still build 6. All right, but I want to say that I'm against this treaty. It will limit our future capabilities. This could jeopardize the defense of our colonies. Besides, if our relations with the Turians turn hostile again, we would be outnumbered in dreadnought count, declared Wright, his voice hard. It didn't surprise me that the Admiral was against it. Limiting our forces was not ideal for a young spacefaring civilization. But there were more factors to consider. Before I could voice my thoughts, Michael beat me to it. Just for clarification, what exactly is a dreadnought by Council standards? With a quick swipe, Anita opened a new file on her datapad. She quickly found the wanted information and replied, Dreadnoughts are kilometer-long capital ships with 800 EOME-long mass accelerator cannons. That is the only description I've found. Just to be clear, that would mean if we built a 2-kilometer ship with a mass accelerator cannons of less than 800 EOM, they would not be limited by the treaty, right? I interjected with my question with a small smile. Anita looked surprised and confused for a moment and checked her files again. She looked up from her datapad and answered, The Treaty of Pharixen only limits the number of dreadnoughts, and their definition is as I said. And the definition about the main armament is that it is a mass accelerator cannon, right? I further questioned, my smile growing a little bigger. Now even the rest looked at me questioningly. Only Dr. Helkin seemed to understand what point I was trying to make. At least, she also had a small smile and a glint in her eyes that spoke of mirth. It was Andrew who voiced the question that was on their mind. What point are you trying to make, Oscar? You already have a plan to circumvent the treaty, right? My smile grew even bigger. A few, I answered. Then spit them out, Oscar. Let us hear what you're thinking of, exclaimed Wright, his voice hard but with a slight of hope in it. If we follow the Treaty of Pharixen and the Citadel's definition of a dreadnought to the letter, the only thing we're not allowed to do is to go over a specified number of ships that are longer than a kilometer and have a mass accelerator cannon of 800 mm length. So if we build a starship of over 1 kilometer length, but with a mass accelerator cannon of 750 RM length, it would not be categorized as a dreadnought, and so not restricted in numbers by the treaty. After I finished voicing my idea, there was a moment of silence as they thought about it. Slowly, the tension disappeared that had been present in the room after Anita explained the conditions of joining the Citadel. Wouldn't the Council quickly stop the construction of these, let's call them, pocket dreadnoughts? Asked Michael, pointing out a possible flaw in my idea. I'm not saying we should start immediately. If we decide to join the Citadel, we should first collect more information about the political landscape and judicial processes. Find the blind spots and use them to our advantage, just like we humans always do. That could be a possibility, said Anita, holding her chin with her right hand and a faraway look in her eyes. A body as large as we believe the Citadel to be would have dozens if not hundreds of administrative and political obstacles to cross if they wanted to create a new law or adjust the Treaty of Faraxon. And more importantly, they won't do it because of their pride, added Andrew. Their pride? Questioned Michael. Yes, their pride. The Council has ruled their part of the galaxy for more than 1,000 years. They won't admit that a species that didn't even have FTL travel for half a century outsmarted them, and every move to stop us from building pocket dreadnoughts, as you called them, will be exactly that, an admittance. I see. The plan is to use their pride against them. Now that I think about it, the possibility that we will be underestimated by the Council is pretty high. Any species that had so much power for such a long time without challenge is bound to become arrogant. I wouldn't even be surprised if the Council species feels superior to every other species. Perhaps each Council member feels that way even about the other members. But that's just speculation for now. Oscar, do you have some more ideas? Sure have, Director. I don't know what their definition of a mass accelerator is, but I'm sure that somewhere in the description it says that EZO is a component. So if we take the EZO away, the cannons wouldn't be mass accelerators anymore. Is something like this even possible? It is, chipped Barbara in. The cannons on starships use EZO to lighten the mass of the projectiles. The actual velocity is created by magnetic coils that accelerate the projectile. In theory, this concept would work even without EZO, but the energy requirements would be enormous. To get the same amount of speed as with EZO, we would need a power plant to power it. Not even our fusion reactors generate enough power for it. To continue using EZO is the better alt. As she said that, she suddenly became very still. For a minute, nothing happened, but nobody made a move. We all knew that Barbara had one of her eureka moments. Without warning, she snatched her datapad, fished a pen out of her jacket, and started scribbling furiously on it while muttering loud enough for us all to hear. Fusion reactors still new, still room for improvement, always room for improvement. Got too comfortable. EZO makes things too easy. There's always more. Better reactors could improve many projects, perhaps even make others feasible. Changing this could lead to no would destabilize other components. Her mutters grew ever quieter until they were no longer audible. It seems like we will see some technological breakthroughs in the coming future, joked Wright. Seems like it, Anita agreed with a quiet laugh. That would be perfect, I said, as it would perfectly fit my next point. Oh, there's still more? Naturally, if we continue on this path, it won't matter if the Turians outnumber us 5-1 in dreadnought count. Not if they need 5 to counter one of ours. I could feel their surprise at my comment. A genuine smile had found its way onto Wright's face as he asked, "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" I returned his smile with one of my own as an answer. Holy shit, you do. Something like that could take decades, maybe even more than a century. Yes, but we humans can be patient if we want to, and even if not, we would use our impatience to reach that goal even faster. Join the Citadel, learn from them, use their technology as a template for our own, improve on it, surpass it. If we didn't get a council seat by this point, we could still leave the Citadel. At this point, we would be strong enough to oppose them if needed, said Andrew. The lesser number of dreadnoughts could even be a boon. The cost to refit them all wouldn't be too high, I commented. Andrew was about to say something as a loud clap interrupted us. It had been Michel, who had stood up from his chair and clapped his hands to get our attention. As he saw that he had it, he leaned forward with his hand lowering on the table to hold him. Ladies and gentlemen, he began. His voice was calm and serious, while his face showed no emotions. It seems to me as if we had already decided that we will join the Citadel. Hesitant nods were his answer, even from Barbara, who had listened to our discussion with one ear and stopped writing when Mikkel clapped. The more I thought about it, the stranger it was. Normally, we would fight tooth and nail against anyone who would try to subject us. And now we unambiguously decided to do so willingly. Perhaps it was the knowledge of what happened in the games, but for me, it felt like the right decision. Without the other species, we would never survive the Reapers. It seemed like the logical step to me, but I didn't know why the others seemed to prefer this direction. Was it because it was the better option? Or was it something else? Before I could get lost in my thoughts, Michael continued to talk. I, too, see joining the Citadel as the right step. Even if we would join as second-class citizens, it would cut off all possibilities of war with any other member species. The technological, cultural, and economical gains are not deniable. But we must not forget that we would give others power over our society, over our whole species, over humanity. That is not a decision we can make. We have no authority to do so. Do not forget that the Alliance is not a government. It is an organization tasked with exploring the galaxy, discovering new technology, and defending human colonies. Before we can sign any treaty with other civilizations, we have to transform the Alliance into a government that can represent humanity as a whole. Applause filled the room after Michael finished. The sound echoed in the room, and I had joined in before I realized it. His words lit a fire in our chests, a fire that would keep us warm even in the darkest winters. Nobody knew how the future would turn out, but we knew that we would stand tall against all adversity, and that we would build a future to be proud of. It took almost 2 minutes for the applause to settle so that Michael could continue. It had always been my plan to transform the Alliance into a governmental body, uniting humanity under one banner while also preserving the independence of its members. Over the years, I worked on this with a team of political experts, and I've talked about this with every single one of you at least once. I wish we had more time, but it has to happen now. Andrew, in your opinion, how long do we need? He seemed to think a moment about it and answered, if we work fast, it will take no longer than a year, maybe a few months more. That fast? Asked Wright and I at the same time. We've done enough groundwork over the years. The colonies won't be a problem anyway, not after showing that we can defend them. And the elements there that would stand against it are a minority with no real support. The only problem will be the nations on Earth. They won't like to lose power, but it is unlikely that they will be able to do anything against it. Last I heard, they were squabbling with each other over who sends how much help to Shangxi. And when the news of the attack on Shangxi arrived on Earth, the same happened. While we were there, defending humanity, they were arguing like children. The people didn't like that. Moreover, a few confidential memos had been leaked to pro-alliance bloggers, who continued to spread them on the internet. Let's just say that there have been a few protests and that the disarmament of the nation's orbital forces will be going a lot more smoothly from now on. All in all, they can't afford to stand in our way right now, not if they want to keep a sliver of power. That coincides with what I've heard over some military channels. Wright picked up, drawing our attention. Mostly it is just some talk among the enlisted soldiers. But some people high up in the chain of command are not happy with their governments at the moment. There was an attack on humanity, and all they could do was twirl their thumbs. It wouldn't surprise me if there's a rise in our recruitment quotas for the Navy and Marine Corps in the coming months. We might even get some with impressive resumes. That's great, but I will wait until I see the numbers black on white, commented Michael. But for now, we focus on what lies before us. Admiral, you will continue to fortify our position on Shangxi and salvage what you can. Every piece could be helpful. Coordinate with our science teams. Barbara, he looked to her, still writing on her datapad, will continue what she's doing, he said with a sigh. With a turn of his head, he focused on Andre and ordered, talk to your contacts in the other intelligence agencies. See if there are some who would like to play on a bigger stage. I have the feeling that we will need them in the future. Meanwhile, Oscar, Anita, and I will either set up or visit some charity events for rebuilding Shangxi. There will be a lot of people who want positive PR, and that is their chance. During the events, we will lobby for support among the movers and shakers for our plans. With them on our side, it will be easier to get things done. For a moment, Mikkel and Anita held eye contact, holding a silent conversation between them, before Anita made a quick glance towards me. A barely noticeable nod was Michael's answer. "We don't know how long it will take to travel to the Citadel," continued Michael, "but I want you on the way at the beginning of June. Tell the council that we are interested in joining, but can't make the decision without a unified government. Also, tell them that we will uphold the 5 Citadel laws and treaties you explained. That should give us some goodwill and time. By the way, Oscar, you will accompany her." That was surprising. I hadn't expected to be on the diplomatic mission to open talks with the Citadel. That I would visit the Citadel in an official capacity was out of the question, but I had thought it would happen at a later time. After all, someone had to broker trade agreements and adapt our currency to the one of the Citadel, and those fell within my purview. Still, I asked them if I heard right in the most eloquent way I could, by pointing at myself and asking, "Me?" "Yes, you," answered Anita instead of Michael. "I need someone I can trust with me. Besides the others within the diplomatic service, I would take with me will be too busy in the coming months. They are the ones that will have to do the grunt work for Michael's plans. Besides, dealing with politicians is not too different from what you have been doing. Like businessmen, they want power, money, and prestige. The only difference is that they have more people to send after you if they want to see you dead. But you will be fine. Just do what you always do. Know who you're dealing with. Know the situation. What are your goals? What does your opponent want? Consider all possibilities and consequences. Then choose the best way to maximize your gain and minimize your loss while also denying your opponent the same. I know how it works. I'm no amateur." I was just surprised for a moment. I defended myself. "Seems like it's decided," chuckled Michael. "I guess we should get to work. This meeting is closed." Chapter 8. May 2nd, 2158. 30:37 local time. Terra Nova, Scott capital. "I thank you for your support. Director Port will be pleased that he can count on you, Mr. Hallow," I said with an easygoing smile. No, it is my pleasure to help. The Alliance showed us their strength, what they can do. "I will put my trust in Mr. Port's vision," assured Daniel Hallow. He was a man well past his 60s, with a rotund stomach that stretched his suit jacket. His face was slightly swollen and red, no doubt from the amount of wine he had drunk over the evening. Not even his well-kept full beard could hide that. But the reason why my smile strained more with every passing second was not his jolly and intrusive nature. No, that was even kind of endearing. It was his smell. The cologne he chose to wear filled the air around him and was biting in my nose. I continued to smile as he recounted how he expanded his construction business to Terra Nova early on in the colonization. My gaze swept over the other guests as I only listened half-heartedly to his story. After all, I already knew how he became one of the wealthiest people on Terra Nova. He had told me not even an hour ago. Nodding and humming at the right moments to feign listening, I continued to look around discreetly. The other guests were all engaged in talking or dancing, while a small band played at the side. I had talked to many of them throughout the evening, trying either to gather support for Michael's plans or money for Shangxi's rebuilding efforts. And a charity event where the rich and famous gathered to be seen was the perfect place for it. Just as Hallow was about to retell how he snatched the contract for the first skyscraper on Terra Nova, my eyes widened as I saw someone I didn't expect to be here heading towards the balcony. My stained smile became a bit more genuine. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hallow," I apologized, "but I just saw someone I have not seen for quite some time. If you would excuse me?" A boisterous laugh was my answer. "Of course! I was about to head to the buffet anyway. Go on, Mr. Dennebrand." I nodded politely and went towards the balcony, dodging the other guests on my way. As I passed the open bar, I grabbed 2 scotch for my friend and me. The cold night air washed over me when I stepped out on the balcony. I hadn't even noticed how badly I needed some fresh air to clear my thoughts until then. Not many people were out here, just some small groups, talking quietly with each other. It didn't take long to find the person I was looking for. He stood alone on the far end of the balcony, close enough to the other groups to not stand out, but also far enough to not be bothered. As I got closer, my eyes wandered subconsciously over his suit. Cut in the modern fashion from a designer on the lower end of high class, a suit that would not garner attention. Not something most of the guests here would even have in their wardrobes. But it fit Andrew's personality. He didn't react as I stepped beside him, but took the glass I offered him wordlessly. No words were exchanged between us as we looked over the growing capital city of Terra Nova. It had been just 6 years since the colony was founded, but over 500,000 people already lived here. 350,000 alone in this city, and the rest spread all over the planet. And the prognosis said the number would continue to rise in the coming years. "Beautiful, isn't it?" whispered Andrew in awe, his eyes never leaving the city. Just 10 years ago, something like this was just a dream. Now it's real, a human settlement on a different planet, in a system thousands of light years away from Earth. Our world has gotten significantly grander, and with it came new challenges. But we overcame them. Now we stand at the edge of something even greater than our ascension to the stars, and with it will come even more challenges and problems. And we will overcome them, as we humans always did, I finished. "That we will," he said with a smile finding its way onto his face. We clinked glasses and drank. The scotch burned down my throat, but it was a pleasant burning. I saw how Andrew studied his glass with a critical eye. "That's a good one," commented Andrew. "What kind is it?" "Nova Turalis, distilled here on Terra Nova. One of their very first, I believe. But you didn't come here to drink. I guess you wanted to talk to me, or else I would never have noticed you." "You don't think I've come for the company?" I snorted. "You? Never." A faked sigh left him, and he shook his head in played indignation before he returned to a more serious mood. "There are a few things I wanted to talk about. I need a second opinion on a few things, and you were the closest," Andrew started. His hand disappeared in his suit jacket for a moment and reappeared moments later with a data pad. When he offered it to me, I took it without hesitating and started to read the open file. It was a page of the Galactic Codex, but one that I didn't remember seeing before in the Asari one, something that I decided to voice to Andrew. "It's a Codex page, but not one the Asari gave us. Where did you get it from?" "It's from a Turian Omnitool. Before you ask, they are microcomputers. You attach it to your wrist or arm and interface with it via an orange hologram. The hologram is different from the ones we use." "How so?" I asked, even if I already knew what he meant. "It is susceptible to touch. That is the way it's meant to be used. Since it's something new, our scientists have started to call it hard light. Our scavenger crews collected them, but nobody knew what they were at first. They thought they were some kind of jewelry or something along those lines. Only after a private put one on his wrist did we learn what they were. The private got a pat on the back for discovering it and a slap on the wrist for playing with unknown technology. Now we're busy pulling every speck of data from it. Would it all not be in the Turians' language?" "It is," confirmed Andrew, taking another sip of his drink. "Or at least was. Our translation programs may not be as sophisticated as theirs. But with enough translated pages to cross-reference, it didn't take us long either. Luckily, there are pictures on each page. Otherwise, it would have taken longer to match the pages." "Lucky us," I chuckled. "Yes, lucky us, but it confirmed our guesses. They have left parts out, haven't they?" I stated more than asked. "They have, but from what I saw, they didn't change the entries we have. After all, there was nothing that could be used against them. But now we have some more information, like the entry about the Solarian STG. Let me guess, spies?" A smirk spread on Andrew's face, and his eyes gained a dangerous glint. The more I looked, the surer I was that his smirk turned more predatory with every passing second. "Correct. And from the reports I got, it seems they're already here spying on us." I wish I could say I wasn't surprised, but I was. Not because the Solarians spied on us or that they were here already. It was because we discovered them, or at least traces. "How do you know?" I asked to satisfy my curiosity. We didn't, at first, he admitted. Only after we translated the codex entry on the STG came the clues together. Traces of EZO where no ship came through for months, signals we couldn't identify. Basically the shadow in the corner of your eye. Now that we know they are here, we can concentrate on tracking them. I'm already tightening the noose. In a week or 3, we should trap them if they don't bug out before. Andrew's face turned in equal measure predatory and delighted. I can't wait until I have the necessary resources to join the game. They have centuries of a head start, but that makes it only more exciting. I will have to use everything I know and then go beyond. Before he could start to chuckle like a deranged madman, I cleared my throat to call him back from his happy place. His head snapped toward me, his eyes widening in surprise, as if he had forgotten I was present. His predatory smile turned into one of embarrassment. "What was that?" I asked amusedly. I knew that Andrew could be passionate, but that level was not something I had seen previously. "Sorry," he said sheepishly, and rubbed the back of his head. I got too excited. The thought that I'm going to go head-to-head with an opponent who had a long time to prepare the board and is extremely smart is an opportunity that I can't miss. Trying to outsmart them will be a challenge that I gladly accept. "As long as you don't start a war," I joked. But the look Andrew gave me was full of mischief. "I won't. Don't worry. Maybe just one in the shadows. Nothing too serious." "If you say so," I said skeptically. We turned back towards the city, enjoying the view it offered us. It was easy to see that it was still bustling with life. Scott's nightlife was like those in the bigger cities back on Earth. Hundreds of people just trying to have some fun, perhaps finding new friends or getting into a brawl. Who knew? Andrew turned to me and opened his mouth to say something when somebody called for me. "Oscar! Oscar, where are you?" I turned around and immediately saw who had called for me. It was the host of today's charity event and an old friend of mine, Rosemary Serta. With a raised hand, I drew her attention towards me. She almost ran in my direction with how fast she was going, but somehow she still made it look elegantly. A huge smile stretched on her face that was framed by her black curls. The shine in her ocean blue eyes spoke of good news. "Is everything all right, Rose? Did something happen?" I asked her when she came close. "It's not just all right, it is great," Rosemary exclaimed, her cheer almost infectious. "I just talked to Dr. Martinez about how the last round of testing was going when she told me that it had already finished. They asserted that there were no grave side effects and we should get the certificate at the end of next week." "You're right. That is great news. Tomorrow I'll contact some people to prepare for the production so that we can start right away," I said happily. "Huh, it seems like her cheer is infectious." "I told you it would pass all tests," she boasted, lifting her hands into her hip. "After all, my Medigel will save countless lives and conquer the market as a sideshow." I raised my hands in the universal gesture of surrender and said, I know, you told me often enough. But don't forget who paid half of the development costs." "Don't worry, I haven't." She bristled before her anger subsided, and a small smile full of gratitude replaced it. "Still, without you, it could have taken years, maybe even decades to get to this moment. So thanks, Oscar." Rosemary closed the distance between us and gave me a quick peck on the cheek before turning around, ready to jump back into the crowd. After taking a few steps, she turned around once more and said, "Someday, you will tell me how you got them to push the timetable for the test forward." "No, I won't," I called back. As she disappeared into the crowd, she threw me one last annoyed look that I answered with a cocky smirk. When I turned back to Andrew, he looked at me with a raised eyebrow and asked knowingly, "Pushing the timetable, hey? How would someone do this?" "You know, the works. You talk to people, promise to finance their science projects, and not look into how their cousin got their post." "So basically, blackmail and bribery?" Andrew asked disapprovingly, but I could see his amusement in his eyes. "Are you sure you should admit it in front of a government official?" "First," I began and pointed my index finger at him, "you're no government official, not yet anyway. Second, I never admitted to anything. Third, Just put it on the heap of blackmail material that you keep hiding under your bed. At that, Andrew reared back with faked shock and asked breathlessly, "How do you know about my heap? I thought I had hidden it well. Did the cleaner talk?" We tried to stay serious for a moment before we broke into laughter. I never really understood why. It hadn't been that funny. But one thing was for sure. It felt like some of the tension I felt building over the last weeks just disappeared. For the first time in days, my shoulders felt relaxed, and I knew it was the same for Andrew. Some of his subtle stress lines smoothed out, and his posture relaxed. "But seriously now, Sesko," said Andrew after we had stopped laughing, "I've seen the specs of this Medigel, and it looked promising. Any plans for it?" "Some. A dispensation grid will be integrated into the military hardsuits so that small wounds can be patched up in the field. It won't be as effective as a combat medic, but it will do its job to keep them alive until one gets to them. That and everything else that is going to come out of your R&D division in the coming months, you will make some people very happy, especially the good Admiral. I've heard that Dr. Hoshiyum has already strengthened our kinetic barriers by around 3%? 3.8 to be precise," I corrected automatically. "I expect him to make even greater progress now that all the Turian wrecks have arrived over Reach. The last time I contacted him, he was looking over every little bit of technology that was declared safe." He sounded like a kid in a candy store. "What about the other projects? Are they on schedule?" "Most of them are. We just had some problems with the ODP. The testing was delayed for a week. But it's nothing to worry about." Instead of asking another question, Andrew just hummed and looked back to the city. There was something on his mind, probably the reason why he came here in the first place. For everything else, a message would have been sufficient. I wanted to ask him, but he was faster with his question. "How did you meet Rosemary Sirta in the first place?" It was clear that he wanted to redirect the conversation for the moment, and though I could press him for his reason, I let it happen. I knew that he would tell me sooner or later, so I began recounting how I met Rosemary. "We've met in college. At first I didn't even know that she was the heiress to the Sirta Foundation. She was going by the name Rose Galad, something about standing on her own feet and not being bothered by idiots. Her mother was already making waves with the eradication of several genetic diseases. We sat next to each other during an economic class, partnering up for some term papers and becoming friends over time. It was totally perchance that we met. Our normal fields of study were completely different. I studied economics and starship engineering, and she studied medicine and biochemistry. The only reason we met was that she wanted to know what to expect when she took over from her mother. After we finished college, we lost sight of each other. The only contact that we had were messages for birthdays or Christmas. That was until 2 years ago. She had the idea for a project that could revolutionize the medical field, but the board that allocated the funds didn't want to give her more. So she asked me if I could loan her more. I read the data, saw how promising it was, and got behind it. We stayed in contact ever since. Does that satisfy your curiosity? More than enough. I would have been satisfied if you just said you met her in college. Then why did you let me talk so much? I questioned annoyedly. No reason, Andrew answered as his hand slipped into his jacket and returned with a data pad for the second time this evening. He held it towards me and said, "Read it and tell me what you think." I took it out of his hands and did as he told me. After I was halfway in, I started to realize what I was reading. It was the Manifesto of Cerberus, written by the elusive man, Jack Harper, himself. One thing had to be said: it was written well. Every single paragraph tried to convince you of his point of view, that an organization like Cerberus, the pre-ME3 Cerberus, was necessary. Someone willing to cross the line to give humanity the edge it needed to stand against alien civilizations. A pro-human organization, huh? I commented, trying to gauge Andrew's reaction. I guess you already have some plans for them. Maybe, he said, and I couldn't find any clue what he was thinking about. I sighed. I understood what he wanted from me, but still asked to get confirmation. You want to know what I would do, correct? That's right. I've already asked Michael what he thinks should be done, but your thoughts interest me too, confirmed Andrew. I thought you didn't ask Michael because Earth is too far away. I lied, he simply said, and started to observe me as if he could read my thoughts. Sometimes it wouldn't surprise me if he could. But I had more pressing things to think about than Andrew's possible mind reading. Cerberus. Of course, I had thoughts about what to do with that organization. Most of them revolved around destroying them. But those were the thoughts of a younger me and concentrated on the time when the Reaper's arrival was imminent. To nib Cerberus in the bud was an option I hadn't even considered, since they were needed to bring Shepard back from the dead after his or hers first encounter with the Collectors. But this line of thought was something I called the game thinking. Just because something happened in the games didn't mean it would happen in the universe I inhabited. My presence changed things, had already done so, and I wanted things to change. But it was so easy to believe that things would happen like in canon. I had sworn to myself to never think that way, but from time to time it happened subconsciously. And now I had to make a decision that could change almost everything I knew about this universe. Of course, Andrew could ignore my decision, but he wasn't the kind of person to dismiss other people's thoughts. With effort, I stopped my descent into the rabbit hole of what-ifs and tried to think about the problem as if I didn't know anything about a possible future. At this moment, Cerberus was probably nothing more than an idea. Perhaps they had some backers, but no extensive network of spies, scientists, soldiers, or people who could fund their expensive projects. Moreover, the rhetoric of Tim spoke to what the general public was feeling. The average person only knew that aliens attacked Shangxi and the Alliance fought them off. He was feeling nervous, anxious, maybe even scared. If we decided to destroy Cerberus before they gained traction, it had to happen quietly. Very quietly. Should news get out that we attacked a pro-human organization, accusations could come up that the Alliance planned to surrender humanity to alien masters, free to do whatever they wanted with us. That could lead to dire internal strife, or in the worst-case scenario, civil war. Maybe I was exaggerating, but I fully believed that the public would lose any trust in the Alliance after we crushed an organization that proclaimed to fight for them. Another thought came to the forefront of my mind. Perhaps it had been influenced by my game thinking, but it was the option I preferred. As I sorted my thoughts, I turned to Andrew to signal him that I was ready to tell him what I would do. This time, he didn't just turn his head towards me, but his whole body, leaning with his side on the railing to show me that I had his full attention. Either we crush them quickly and quietly before they can gain much support, I started, or we use whatever they do to our advantage. A shadow of a smile hushed over his face as I said that and gestured for me to continue. I'm no psychologist, but from what I've read, I predict that the man behind this manifesto is ready to cross any and all boundaries in the name of humanity. Boundaries that we can't or won't cross, be they laws, treaties, or morality. At least that's the feeling I get. I got it as well, agreed Andrew. Organizations like this will always exist, so it's better to keep the one we already know. And theoretically, we can't do anything at the moment anyway, because they haven't broken any law as far as I know. So my idea is to let them be for the moment. You would just let them be? Nothing else? No, sorry, I expressed that wrong. I corrected myself. We let Cerberus grow, but prevent it from growing too fast. In the meantime, we insert agents into it, some that feed us information and others that keep themselves hidden. The latter ones have to be absolutely loyal because they will be part of the organization for years, maybe even decades. But they would be essentially the moment we decide to shut Cerberus down for good. What about the information feeders? They would give us information about every facility that has research or data that could be used to supplement our own. Alliance Marines would then raid these facilities and bring back everything they found. The agent would have to be extracted as well, if he believes his cover is blown. Furthermore, to keep the Alliance safe from the backlash Cerberus will generate, there has to be neither official nor unofficial cooperation between us. Not ever, else we could be accused of aiding them. When I finished, I lifted my glass and drank the rest of my scotch in one go. Meanwhile, Andrew stayed quiet, still looking at me as if he was searching for something. I guess he found what he was looking for because he nodded to himself and stopped observing me. Even his eyes changed from the cold calculation to a warmer expression. I've shown Michael the exact same file, but his answer differed significantly from yours. He wanted to ignore them, not seeing the possible risks in doing so. I respect Michel, I really do, but he can be amazingly naive. He has his ruthless side, but it only comes out when something is actively threatening him and his projects. But sometimes dangers have to be contained before they can become threats. I continued his line of thought. Exactly, exclaimed Andrew quietly. Every society has groups with opinions that could be considered radical, but as long as they stay within the system, they are not that much of a danger. The problem is when they start to operate outside of it. They isolate themselves from others, refuse to see other opinions as equally important, and start to become violent. Yes, and at that point it becomes very difficult to dismantle such an organization. Usually, before they become openly violent, their infrastructure has already integrated into others and tries its best to go unnoticed. It becomes a challenge just to find out where to start when you don't know how they are organized. And let me guess, you have already started to do just that. I have, Andrew confirmed with a firm nod. Some of my people are already searching for the identity of the man who calls himself the elusive man. He is the suspected leader of Cerberus, and I want to know who I'm dealing with. Sadly, I won't be able to insert any long-term agents for now. I don't have enough people for these kinds of operations, but it's coming together slowly now that we got the green light to create the AIS officially. In 2 or 3 years, we should be ready to insert the first agents. The long-term operators will take a bit more time. I want to vet them personally to make sure they're up to the task. Do you need some help to make things go smoother? I offered. Not at the moment. Creating the organizational structure is what we must do first. There's not much you can do to help. But later, for our field operations, we will need dummy companies to give the fake identities of your agents something substantial, I interrupted Andrew. Furthermore, you need a way to transfer money without being noticed. I'll set up a few smaller companies over the next year. Some where the workers have to travel a lot, shipping, surveying, a courier service, the usual. It's better if they really exist and do real work. Less suspicious that way. Makes it easier to hide money transfers anyway. And anybody who looks closer will think I set them up to avoid some taxes. I knew I was coming to the right person for this, grinned Andrew and clapped me on the back. The coming years will be something truly special, won't they? I couldn't help but laugh at how right he was, more than he would know, and said, that they will be. Chapter 9. June 16, 2158, 8:17 SET, SSV Constantinople, en route to the Citadel. I dragged myself into the mess hall of the SSV Constantinople in my quest to find some coffee to get rid of the last semblances of drowsiness that clung to me. Just as I stepped into it, I almost crashed into a yawning crew member who was on his way to bed after finishing his shift. With a quick step to the left, he brushed past me before I could even register the situation. The shock of the almost crash sent a jolt through my system that banished most of my sleepiness. Without further ado, I went to the mess sergeant, who gave me a plate of something that was supposed to be breakfast and a cup of coffee. So with a tray full of grub, for it deserved no other name, and a coffee that could be mistaken for oil, I looked for a place to eat. I found one when I saw Anita sitting a few tables away from me with 2 men in Alliance fatigues. Seeing no reason to avoid them, I made my way over and set my tray down at Anita's right. I sat down, mumbled a good morning, and took a sip of my coffee. Something I immediately regretted as my sense of taste recoiled at the flavor. What the hell is that swill? I cursed, still shocked at the horrible taste. Never tried the coffee on a military ship before, I guess. If you drink enough of it, the taste gets better, said the younger of the 2 soldiers before me with amusement in his voice. Of course it gets better if you drink more of it, I snarked back. Either your taste buds adapt or they all die. Perfect example of Darwin's survival of the fittest. That remark got the other 2 to smirk as well, and I took another sip of swill, not even trying to hide my grimace. You can say about military coffee what you want, but I got the job done. 1 sip of it, and you are wide awake. Just not the way you wanted. They've told me that you would be grumpy in the mornings, but they failed to tell me that you would become snarky as well, Anita joked, taking a sip of her own coffee without any visible reaction. Only when confronted with crimes against taste. How soldiers can drink stuff like this, I will probably never understand. And the breakfast doesn't look promising either. But it's better than usual. Perks of having diplomats on board, added the younger soldier. Now that I wasn't preoccupied with trying to overcome the disgusting taste of the coffee, the younger soldier's face looked familiar to me, but I couldn't place it. If that is the better version, I don't want to know what you usually eat, I replied, and looked apprehensively at my food. Before we delve into the subject of food even deeper, we should get introductions out of the way, said Anita and redirected the conversation away from food. Oscar, these two men belong to the N7 team that is responsible for our safety while we are on the Citadel. She pointed to the older man who sat in front of her and said, "This is Commander Alec Ryder, the team leader." That was a name I knew, and before I could say anything, Anita dropped the next bomb. "And this is," she continued while pointing at the other man, "is his second in command, Lieutenant David Anderson." Well, I was lucky that I couldn't react, after having this dropped on me. Two people I had only known before from behind a screen were now sitting right in front of me. I took every scrap of self-control I could find and greeted without making a scene. That would have been awkward otherwise. It's nice to meet the people who are making sure we won't get killed. I'm Oscar Denebrin, head of the economics branch of the Alliance. It's nice to meet you as well. I've heard much about you, Mr. Denebrin, replied Ryder. You have? I inquired. I and probably every other soldier in the Alliance. While you have probably more contact with the brass, even the regular foot soldiers know about you. After all, you are the guy who's responsible for building their ships, armor, and guns. And as long as you keep doing a good job, their thanks won't change into curses anytime soon. I couldn't help but chuckle at his blunt way of speaking. I'll try to keep it that way then. To distract me from the taste of the food, I kept the conversation going. Does anyone know where we currently are and how much longer it will take to get to the Citadel? I missed the last briefing. There was an accident in a mining facility and an emergency meeting was called. I did notice that you boarded the ship only minutes before it was supposed to take off, commented Anita. I wanted to talk to you, but you went to sleep as soon as you were shown your cabin. But we can do that later. As for where we are, we're about a day away from the Shangxi system. From there, it will take around 5 days to the Citadel if everything runs smoothly, Ryder answered me. We arrive a bit later than we planned, but that's because the upgrades to the ship took longer than expected. Hope they're worth it, added Anderson. I hoped so too. The departure was moved back for 3 days because the refitting of the SSV Constantinople took longer than expected. As far as I knew, there had been a problem with adjusting the shield matrix. The upgrade was supposed to strengthen our kinetic barriers by a whole 4%. But while they were installing the necessary hardware, something went wrong. Someone forgot to connect the existing to the new hardware so that they would combine into one stronger grid, and most of the extra time was spent trying to find where. They are worth it, but not in the way you think, Lieutenant, said Anita while eating the last of her breakfast. What do you mean, Miss Goyle? I don't think I understand, questioned Anderson, and I took over for Anita in answering him. We're traveling right into the lion's den. If they want to see us dead, we're dead. A few % of shielding power will not save us from that, I said, and Anderson's eyes widened a fraction. Ryder, on the other hand, didn't react at all, and Anita just nodded knowingly. It's a statement, I declared simply and left it at that. I still don't know what you mean with that, sir. As I was about to explain, Ryder explained in a gruff voice. That's because you're still fresh out of N school. You may have graduated as an N7 with top marks all around the board, but you haven't had much experience with politicians. The more you climb the ranks, the less it is like basics. It becomes more of a political playfield, where every action has different meanings behind it. And the statement the Alliance wants to make has a few of them, all depending on how your point of view. And the meanings we want to convey are that we can either be a valuable ally, or if they try to fuck with us, a formidable enemy, I said. Not exactly how I would have phrased it, but the essence of our intent is there, confirmed Anita with a sigh. Then she threw me a look of annoyance and added, Of course, it is a bit more complex than what Oscar said. My comment was just to establish a baseline to work from, I defended myself, trying not to shrink away from her gaze. I knew I would lose in the duel of who could keep eye contact longer, so I didn't even try and turn towards Anderson again to explain further. It hit me again how young he was. He was barely in his 20s, and I was 10 years his senior. I was even older than Ryder, who was just short of 30. Damn, now I felt old. Luckily, Anita was still older. Not that I would ever voice that. I liked living too much for that kind of folly. It is partly, as I already said, I began when I saw that I had Anderson's attention. Even Ryder was looking interested, perhaps trying to get another opinion. There is a reason why a standard cruiser was chosen instead of a heavy one. A dreadnought is a strategic asset that we can't afford to lose. Same with the heavy cruisers. And while they have probably more data on our frigates, since they were the most numerous at Shangxi, they just don't have enough impact for what we want to accomplish. And what exactly is that? Asked Anderson. At the moment, I took a short break to drink another sip of coffee, showing off how fast we advance our technological prowess, replied Ryder in my place. That is what you mean, right? Correct, I agreed. The moment we meet any Turian ships, at the latest when we arrive at the Citadel, they will scan our ships and compare it to the sensor data they have. Our frigate escorts, the SSV Seine and SSV Donau, will match the data they have, but the SSV Constantinople will not. The readings of our shielding will show an increase of 4% in just 2 months, still off from their own, but already closer than before. And now think about what it would mean if we could keep this improvement constant over the next 2 years, or at least a 3% average, interjected Anita, and Anderson took a moment to calculate the numbers roughly. That's an increase of shielding power of around 50%, he said with astonishment. And after 3 years, around 100%, and after 5 years, even 200%. By the way, I calculated that with the 4% increase. Furthermore, all these numbers don't take into account that we could make a major breakthrough, or how the improvements in other fields could create a beneficial synergy between them, I explained. But those numbers can't be right. They are not, I agreed. It's not feasible to think that the improvement rate stays constant around 3% or even higher for 5 years. But we expect it will take us no longer than 6 or 7 years to close the gap between the level of their starships and ours. Even the more pessimistic predictions predict no more than 10 years. That is around the number of years I thought of, commented Ryder casually. Anderson furrowed his brows and inquired, and how is that going to help us? Wouldn't it be better to keep our pace of advancement secret? We considered that approach as well, conceded Anita. But we ultimately dismissed it. The codex entries of the history of the Council species, something you should have gotten, focus on the time around their discovery of mass effect and the mass relays and everything after that, as if the time before became unimportant. Nonetheless, every Council species traveled the stars for more than 100 years, or even longer before meeting another galactic civilization. Unlike us, who left our home system only 10 years ago. So you want to say that the Council, perhaps even all Citadel species, will be intimidated by our fast progress? After all, even if it was just a scouting fleet, we beat back the Turians, guessed Ryder. Not intimidated, but most certainly worried, I corrected. They will see us as an unknown variable, one that could possibly change the centuries-old status quo. If the Council already knows that we had FTL for only 10 years, the impact of this ship will be less than hoped. But it will still be a reminder of our capabilities. It shows that we didn't just luck out with a big Prothean ruin to get us here. Anita took over from where I stopped almost seamlessly and said, the goal is for them to want to keep us in check, and that is only possible with peaceful relations between us. Any overly aggressive action against us will be met with resistance, not only from our side, but from theirs as well. As long as we don't give them a reason, no attack against us will happen. Besides, by trying to keep us in check, they will do exactly what we want. My prediction is that they want to keep us close, maybe even make us dependent on them. That way we can study their technology, learn from their cultures, and use it all to grow as a species. After she finished explaining, Anita looked Anderson in the eyes and asked, "Do you understand, no, Lieutenant?" Her stare and the dangerous edge to her smile were making the young man visibly nervous. He swallowed loudly and replied, "Yes, ma'am. I understand. I shared a look with Ryder, who looked as amused as I felt. He put a hand on Anderson's shoulder, who flinched a bit at the sudden contact. No matter what kind of person was on the other side of one of Anita's stairs, they always got a little jumpy afterward. Even a Krogan would shy away. Now, give him a break, said Ryder. But here is one thing I have to ask when we are already speaking of restrictions. Last I heard, 3 relays were slated to be opened. What happened to those plans? Mostly canceled for the moment. We called back 2 of the ships sent to activate them, but the 3rd had problems with communications, I answered, and made sure to stress the word problems to make it clear what really happened. In short, the message was delayed by Andrew long enough so that the SSV Houston already opened the relay by the time they got the message. And it was completely accidental that it led to a cluster with multiple secondary relays in multiple planets that were either rich in minerals or ready for colonization. Although there was one accident, admitted Anita to my surprise. Really? What happened? I didn't keep up with the memos as it seems. She took a deep breath and said, a privately owned survey ship opened a mass relay. They were low on fuels and thought it would lead back into Alliance space. Let me guess, Anderson deadpanned it. It didn't. Anita didn't even try to hold her sigh back. No, it didn't. And now we have a path into our outer regions, one where we can't just park a fleet to protect it because the logistics make it impossible. I already talked with Wright about it, and he thinks it will leave us open for attacks, because from there, you can reach secondary relays, which point in the direction of our colonies. Wright said he's already organizing scouting missions to find out where exactly, and he's drawing up defensive plans for the colonies that are the most vulnerable. That was definitely not good. Secondary relays can lead to dozens of places. To predict the exit point of any ship that uses one is more a game of chance at times. And those idiots opened a way for pirates and slavers to come close to our colonies. That was the thing I wanted to prevent when I pressed for the regulation that relays should only be opened when it was clear where they led to, and a ship with a DR drive mapped the connected system. It took me 6 years to get this regulation accepted because the Alliance got pressured by a lot of people to open as many relays as possible to expand our influence. Damn it, I cursed quietly. I'll speak with Wright about it when we get back. While our most important colonies will get prioritized, I'll see what I can do so that they get some ODPs as well. I've heard about them, said Ryder. There is some talk that you're developing stationary defenses for planets, but I thought they would still take a while. Are they already finished? Yes and no, was my answer. On my way to the Constantinople, I got an update from my lead researcher. The testing is underway, and the numbers seem promising, but it still needs fine-tuning. Their power is around that of a frigate, which is quite good for a first try, but that is not that which we envision. If we get the power somewhere between a frigate and a cruiser, we will call it a success and start building them en masse. They are designed with modularity in mind so that we can distribute them now and continue to improve them without having to construct them from scratch every single time. That could give us the advantage if we ever have to defend a colony again, whistled Anderson. That's precisely why we are building them. Any invading fleet would be hampered by the ODPs, giving the ground forces enough time to get ready, even if there wasn't a defense battle group. For a moment, a comfortable silence settled between us before Ryder tapped Anderson on the shoulder and said, "We should get going, David. Training is in a few minutes. I want the team to stay sharp, even if nothing is going to happen while in transit. It's better to be prepared." "Yes, sir," Anderson replied with a sharp nod and moved to stand up, his tray firmly in his hands. I hadn't even noticed how fast the time flew by, or that I had eaten almost all of my breakfast. Only the stale taste in my mouth confirmed that I had eaten something and that my food didn't grow feet spontaneously and walked away. When the 2 and 7 soldiers stood, Ryder spoke for both of them. "Thank you for your company this morning, ma'am, sir. I'm sure we will have more opportunities to talk during our travel. If you excuse us." With that, both turned away as one and went on to give their dirty dishes back. As the 2 walked away, Anita turned to me and said, "I've got to do some things as well, but I would like to give you a summary of the last briefing. Come to my cabin at 1700. Commander Ryder will be there as well to give you an overlook of our security detail. I could only answer with a nod because she disappeared too fast for me to finish chewing the last of my food. After I swallowed, I leant back in my chair, swirling the rest of my coffee in its cup. My mind was going over the last minutes, trying to process that I just met two people that played an important role in the Mass Effect games. I knew my self-control was good, but not that good. Seriously, I would have expected that I would be somewhat awkward, but nothing happened. My mind was probably smart enough to shut down the parts responsible for awkwardness. And with more time talking to them, the novelty of meeting them disappeared as well. They may have been game characters once, but now they were as much human as I was. Also, they weren't yet the legends they would grow to be, especially Anderson. He held himself like a professional and proud soldier, but he hadn't developed the sheer gravitas he was known for yet. But the beginnings of it could already be observed. The same with Alec Ryder. On that note, I would take care to keep in contact with Alec Ryder. The man would become an expert in the field of artificial intelligence. No matter what the opinion of the Citadel on AI was, they were much too useful to ignore. Be it EDI or SAM, both were integral to the success of their respective heroes. And they proved that the inherent fear of AI was, maybe not completely, but still, wrong. I was sure that with enough time, contacts, and money, I would be able to procure an exception permit for AI research. The advantages of working harmoniously with AI could give us an edge when the Reapers arrived that the canon universe didn't have. Even if only a few AIs could be created, the knowledge gained by researching them could help us to refine existing six into something better. Perhaps into something like the dumb AI in Halo. I swallowed the last of my coffee, shuddering once again. Against all expectations and the adaptation of my taste buds, it had gotten even worse. Swearing to myself that if I drink this coffee again, to never let it get cold, I stood up to bring my dishes back. There were still a few emails that I had to answer and info packages to read. June 17th, 2158. 1649, SSV Constantinople, Shangxi System, en route to the Citadel. I just finished sending the last of my emails and was on the way towards the bridge. I had seen the transition into FTL via mass relay a few times already, but the wonder had never left me. And this time, it was even more special. I would be among the first humans to leave human-controlled space to meet with a galactic government. Among the first humans to set foot on the Citadel, to even see it. That thought alone sent shivers down my back. I still remember the moment in the first Mass Effect game when this massive space station appeared behind the nebula. The sheer wow I felt at that moment. And now I would get to see it in reality. The smile I had didn't fade when I entered the bridge and took my place next to Anita and Ryder, who had also come to witness this monumental moment. "Exciting, isn't it?" commented Ryder with a small, genuine smile. The first I've seen on him. Normally he looked more serious than anything else, but now, nothing of that was present. "It is," I agreed, my smile growing a bit as I took in the atmosphere of the bridge. It was the usual hustle and bustle, nothing out of the ordinary, but the mood was different from what I was used to on a military vessel. The professional calmness that was usually prevailing was absent. In its place, a nervous but still excited mood circulated among the crew members, as if everyone was feeling the weight of the moment. Only Captain Peterson stood in the middle, solid as a rock. Her face showed nothing of the excitement of her crew, but neither was she displeased with it. Should anything out of the ordinary happen, she would calmly assess the situation and then take the necessary steps. That was the reason why she was chosen for this task. Hitting the relay in 20 came from one of the stations and was answered by another with, "Transmitting data now." "All hands brace for relay transit," called Captain Peterson, and I made sure my foothold was firm. Hitting relay in 5, 4, 3, a jolt ran through the ship when the mass relay accelerated it into FTL speeds. I swayed a bit on my feet, but didn't fall over like when I traveled via relay for the first time. That would have been embarrassing. Chosen to represent humanity on the Citadel, but can't even keep standing when going FTL. Everyone on the bridge took one moment to watch the stars flash by. It didn't matter if you were seeing it for the first time or the 100th time. What do you think awaits us on the other side? I questioned no one in particular. I don't know, but hopefully nothing to worry about, said Anita, who was watching the FTL corridor as well. 10 seconds until we drop out of FTL, called a crew member, and right on his cue we did. I want sensor data on the system. Miller, find me the next relay and calculate a path. Fardes, are our escorts here? Johnson? You. Captain Peterson fired orders rapidly, and her crew went to work immediately. She would have continued to do so if it had not been for the communications officer who called out to her. Captain, we have an incoming transmission. A transmission from who? At that moment, the scan of the system finished, and the sensor officer said, Ma'am, there are 20 ships in the system. Most of them match the outlines of Turian ships. The others are unknown. But one looks like the diplomatic vessel that came to Shangxi. Patch them through, ordered Captain Peterson calmly. In seconds, the connection was stable, and the voice of a Turian resonated on the bridge. Unknown ship, this is Captain Urvinus of the THV Gladius. You are entering Citadel space. Identify yourself or prepare to be boarded, said the now identified Captain Urvinus. There was a moment of absolute silence on the bridge when everything came to a sudden halt. I couldn't help myself and muttered, Nothing to worry about, huh? Which got me a scathing look from Anita. Before the moment could stretch on, Captain Peterson replied in her usual calm voice, This is the SSV Constantinople of the Human System Alliance. I have diplomats on board. We're on our way to the Citadel to meet with the Council. Not a minute later, the Turian captain spoke once again. Copy that. The Council told us to expect you. An Asari and Turian frigate will attach to your escort and show you the way. Do not deviate from the course we will send you. Urvinus out. Well, that's nice of them, I commented. At least we know now that our translators work just fine. It would have been a shame otherwise. As we followed the new course, the 2 new frigates joined up with our own frigate escort as if they had been part of it from the beginning. Without much further trouble, we were back on the way to the Citadel. Not much longer until we're at the Citadel. Maybe we should think of some nice quotes for that moment. It's going to be historical after all, I joked, and got a smile from Ryder and an eye roll from Anita for it. But one thing was true. It was going to be a moment for the history books.